What's up, everybody? Welcome to the very first Soccerology 101 video. The goal of this series is, as the name suggests, to go over some basics of soccer, how the sport operates, some of the terminology, to sort of use other major American sports as a point of comparison to help explain some of the intricacies and the things that make soccer unique so that even if you're not a huge soccer fan or you're just getting into the sport, you can understand the sort of the groundwork, how things operate, and be part of those conversations and know what people are talking about. And we're going to try and do these videos sort of lined up with what is happening in the soccer world. And considering that the European season ended about a month ago, there is only one place to start, and that is transfers. So first, very simply, what is a transfer? Sounds like kind of a strange word. You don't hear it in other sports. A transfer is very simply the main player acquisition tool used in soccer. It is the equivalent of a trade in the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL, whatever. However, there are differences between the two, and that's what we're going to sort of get into here. Unlike a trade, a transfer involves monetary compensation and usually only monetary compensation. Transfers are not player for player exchanges. Transfers are player for money exchanges. So that is where some of the difference lies. So it's not exactly a trade, but it is the primary way in which a player moves from one team to another in soccer. And transfers can happen inside a league. So a player playing for one team, a team in a league can buy a player from another team in that league, or they can happen between leagues. So you could have a Spanish team buying a player from the German league, for example. There's no restrictions on how, sort of who you can go acquire. And the other similarity in terms of trades is that most transfers happen in the off season during what is known as the summer transfer window. There are two transfer windows, one in the summer, one in the winter. They operate in a similar fashion to trade deadlines, where you have that main primary opportunity during the off season to improve your team, for players to move and get settled before the next season starts. That's the summer transfer window in soccer. It opens a little while after the season ends and stays open. Each league gets to sort of set their own window, so most of them stay open until just before the season starts. Used to be that they were all extended a little bit into the season. That's kind of changed in recent years. And then there's the winter transfer, which is like the trade deadline. It's the opportunity to go get that extra player to bolster your team, to add a little bit of depth, to replace the player who got injured and is out for an extended period of time, that kind of thing. So, in a very broad sense, it operates very similarly to the transaction timeline in other sports in the United States. You've got your quote unquote off season, which is the summer transfer window, and then you've got your trade deadline, which is the winter transfer window. Okay, so how does this actually work? How do you complete a transfer, and how does a player move from one team to another? First things first, the two clubs must agree on what is called a transfer fee. This is the compensation that is exchanged to get the player from one team to the other. So if the teams cannot agree, you don't have a deal. The second part of this is that then the player must agree on a contract with the new team. Contracts do not carry over, which is one of the big differences between transfers and a trade. Right, when you trade a player, that player remains under contract in NBA, MLB, whatever league. Not the case in soccer. So this is where player power and players really have their leverage, because if they don't want to move, they are not going to. teams cannot trade them against their will, cannot complete a transfer without the player giving their approval because they have to sign this new contract. So this creates a little bit of a different situation there. But assuming those two things happen, then you have a successful transfer and the player is able to move from one team to the other. As a general rule, in the top European leagues, there is no salary cap. There is no max contract. There are none of these sort of barriers to or limitations on what teams can spend. The only real one is what's called financial fair play, which is a set of rules, guidelines, the European Soccer Authority, called UEFA, put into place basically to prevent teams from spending money they don't have so that they don't go bankrupt. It has not been particularly successful. It has not been well enforced. It is a source of controversy, and it really doesn't have that much impact at the end of the day. So what this means is that the closest comparison you can make is to Major League Baseball, where the New York Yankees are just going to have more money to spend and more financial firepower than the Tampa Bay Rays, for example. So you can offer a player a better salary in that contract, and you can pay a transfer fee other teams simply don't have the money to afford. This is how you get these super teams like Manchester City, PSG. It's how Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, all of these big teams you might have heard of, Manchester United, are able to be so good year after year because they have these global brands and all of this financial power, so they can go buy the best players from other teams because those players are incentivized to make the move because usually it's better financial compensation. It's a chance at a higher quality competition. You're competing at the highest level, a chance to win trophies, all of that stuff. So this is not a fair system. It is inherently unfair. So this is why the best players kind of end up at these top clubs, is because there is nothing prohibiting these teams from spending money over and over and over. There is no consequence for shelling out $100 million for a player if it doesn't work. That player is not taking up a portion of your salary cap or anything like that. Now, there are exceptions to this and little intricacies here or there, but as a general rule, that is how it works. The other part of this is what are known as transfer rumors. And this is an important part of the conversation because this is another major difference between how soccer transactions work and how transactions in other U.S. sports work. Players get, the terminology to use is linked to clubs all the time, linked to a potential move. This could be something as simple as somebody on social media said some team is interested in player X. It could be more intricate. The point here is that a player being linked to a club means very, very little, if anything at all. It might be true, it might not. Even if that team is interested in that player, it doesn't mean a deal is going to get done because, again, the team the player is currently on has to agree to sell that player. That player has to want to make the move, and the team has to be willing to pay whatever that transfer fee is to acquire that player. So there are insiders like your Woj's, your Adam Schefters. Fabrizio Romano is kind of the top guy at the moment. And most of their information is accurate. They're not out there spewing random stuff. But there are people who are, and most of the info is either shaky or irrelevant, as a general rule of thumb. The main difference, the best way I can try and sort of explain this is, right, Adam Schefter and Adrian Wojnarowski are doing a lot of tweeting after something has happened. This team has agreed to trade for this player is going to sign a max contract, that kind of thing. A lot of what soccer reporting is this team wants this player wants to move, this team has submitted a bid, a offered a transfer fee for a player. And again, like I said, most of that just doesn't actually mean anything. So if you are somebody getting into soccer and you want to be confident that what you are hearing actually matters, or to sort of understand when you can really believe things, is the better way to put it. The best advice anybody will give you is to wait until teams officially announce transfers. They will put it on social media, they will make little videos, they will send out pictures of that player holding up their jersey, they will tell you they have acquired this player and they've signed a contract through whatever year. Until that moment, there is no guarantee something is actually happening. Right, if Woj says a team's trading for a player, you don't wait until the team actually announces the trade to start acting like that is accurate. That's not how this works in soccer. So that was something important I wanted to highlight, because that can be very confusing. It is a very different world. You have to treat it differently as a result. So our other types of transactions here, wanted to also mention these briefly, because not everything is a transfer in the way I described. The other primary player acquisition tool is what is called a loan. This is something that does not exist in other major U.S. sports. What a loan is it is an agreement between two teams to send a player from one team to the other temporarily, without the team that is allowing that player to leave losing control of that player's rights. So this is often a mechanism used by bigger teams as a way to get younger players experience. They will go loan out the 18-year-old, the 20-year-old, who's not going to get very much playing time for them this season, but they value and think has a future at their club. They'll loan them out to another team in the same league. Often it's to a team in a lower division or a different league where the competition isn't quite as stiff, and that player will actually be in a position to get playing time. So the idea here is that everybody is going to benefit. That player gets valuable experience and playing time they wouldn't get at their club, which is then become known as the parent club if they're on loan. And the team who is getting the player on loan is getting a valuable player they can use to help them that season. So in a perfect world, the player thrives, the team they get loaned to benefits, and then either that team wants to now make a offer to buy them permanently, or they're ready to go help the team that they are still owned by, whatever it might be. That their value increases, they become better, the team they've spent that period of time with benefits. Typically, loans are somewhere between half a season and 2 seasons. The typical loan is just a season. So you agree to the loan before the season starts. That player then spends the season with the team, and afterward then returns to the club who actually they have signed a contract with. Loans have gotten a little bit more complex in that sometimes there will be either an option or an obligation to buy that player included in the loan. How this works is when that loan deal is agreed to, there will be a transfer fee included. And then if the team has an option to buy that player, at the end of the loan, whatever length of time is determined, they can choose whether they want to pay the agreed upon transfer fee, that price, to buy that player permanently to complete the transfer, or they have the option to choose not to do that, and then that player just goes back to their club. Obligation to buy means at the end of the day, once that loan is over, the team receiving the player on loan has to pay the agreed upon transfer fee and make that loan a permanent transfer. This is often used as a mechanism to basically push payments down the road, right? So you get a player for, say, an entire season, before you actually have to pay that transfer fee. So it's a way to sort of allow teams to get their finances in order and prepare, knowing that that expense is going to be coming the next season, the next summer, whatever it might be. The other sort of common player acquisition situations that you do see from time to time and are sort of normal terminology and very, very common in U.S. sports: trades, free agency. Trades in soccer are basically called player swaps. Almost always, with very few exceptions, it is one player for one player. You don't see one team sending two players to another team who's sending three players to another team, and that third team is then sending two players back to the first team. 3-team deals, 4-team deals don't happen. It is almost always a team sends a player to another team who sends a player back to that other team in return. Often there's also some kind of compensation attached to it. So this is a way to maybe take, wipe out a little bit of salary or improve your team a little bit. Sometimes it's as simple: these two players are about the same, and we just decided to switch them. Maybe they need a change of scenery. The other part of this is free agency does exist. It is nowhere near as important as it is in other sports. Players basically only become free agents if their team no longer wants them and doesn't want to offer them a new contract. So they'll play through the end of their contract, and there will not be an extension offered, or they'll choose not to extend it. And so then they are free to sign with any club. The important point I want to make here is that because players are able to have that power and the ability to to engineer a transfer while they are under contract, there is very little incentive for a player to run down their contract to sort of get to free agency. You're not putting yourself right. The whole idea of an NBA player, an NFL player getting to free agency is that they are in the open market and all of these teams can bid for their services. In theory, it's going to get them the most money and the most opportunity. You can do that basically anytime you wish in soccer, because if you are a good enough player and teams want you, you are going to be able to either do things like handing in a transfer request. Same thing as requesting a trade. You tell your team, I don't want to be here anymore. I would like to go somewhere else. And teams have to pay attention to this, because if you are willing to simply play out your contract, or in some extreme cases, not show up to work, there isn't really anything they can do about it. If you play out your contract, then you're walking away from free. And that is something teams do not want, especially with superstars. So they might try and convince you to stay, but at the end of the day, at any point, you can basically say, I want to leave. Or if you are a rising star who's on a team that you've kind of outgrown that wants to get to that next level, your team is going to be incentivized to make that move happen for you before your contract starts running down, because that's how you maximize a player's value. Once a player gets to 1 year left on their contract, it doesn't matter how gifted you are. There is very little value there, because they can leave that next summer. It is all about leverage. And so this is where players really have a lot of power. And it's why you almost never see the best players in the world enter free agency. If they want to move, they're going to find a way to more or less make it happen. If you have a player that doesn't want to play for you anymore, there's only so much you can do. So, those are some of the differences. That is basically how player acquisition works in soccer, specifically transfers. hopefully that helps a little bit sort of understand how this whole thing happens. Be sure to be on the lookout for future Soccerology videos. This will be a series we're going to continue to do all the way through the World Cup. Make sure you subscribe right here on YouTube so you don't miss any of them. And we will see you next time.